Ooh-ah. Chaver, we got work to do today, Chaver. We got work to do today. We got some work to do today. Okay. How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we said in Daf Nun, Daf 50 of Masechta Gittin. Friends, what do you want me to tell you? We're continuing the mission that we started yesterday. That talks about different, Edis and Ziboris and Beinonis. Discusses that kind of stuff. But it's like the whole daf is like on, like even the end of the daf is like a sugya. But unlike in the past when I've said like I don't want to start a whole new sugya at the end of the daf, over here we're going to do it for two reasons. A, because if we don't do it now, we'll have to do it tomorrow, and tomorrow's not going to be any easier. And B, it's not like a sugya that like really continues. It's not like we're starting a new thing that's going to last the next, So we're just going to have to do it. We got a bunch to do on Mem Testament Bays. Friends, we got to work through this together. It's a grind, man. It's a grind. Here we go. We're on Daf Mem Testament Bays, about 20 lines before it gets wide at the two dots, Ksubas Isha Biziboris. So the Mishnah had said that the ksube of a woman who gets, let's say this, who's no longer married, her ksuba is paid from Ziboris, from the lowest quality land of the person, the fellow who she was married to. Amar Marzucha Beder of Nachman. So now it says Marzucha Beder of Nachman lo amarin ela miyasme. So I avoided saying if we're talking about a widow or if we're talking about a divorcee because that's taka the machlokas. So it says Marzucha Beder of Nachman that when we say that a woman collects her ksuba from Ziboris, that is talking about a widow. That a widow who collects from the orphans, from the Yisomim, she collects the ksuba from Ziboris. Aval mine dide, but if she gets divorced and she's collecting her ksuba from her ex-husband, well then, beinonis, she collects from beinonis, not from Ziboris. Miyasme my iria ksubas isha, afilu komile nami. Perfect the Gemara, 1 second. Marzucha Beder of Nachman, you're telling me that if she's an almana and she's collecting her ksuba from the Yisomim, so she collects from Ziboris, but then what's unique about a ksuba? After all, the Mishnah said, let's go weiter. Now we learn in our Mishnah, that extracting payment, I think maybe both work, but I think exacting, is the preferable one. I don't know. If anybody who's receiving payment, who's exacting payment from the Yisomim, so that would be anybody exacting payment from Yisomim, that where it's always from Ziboris. So what's unique about the ksuba of an Isha being Ziboris? Right, so Marzucha Beder of Nachman says that when it says that, that a woman collects her ksuba from Ziboris, it's afika if she's an almana. But what do you mean? She's collecting from the Yisomim. Anybody? What's unique about ksuba? Anybody collecting from Yisomim collects Ziboris. So where am I? Elo mina Ziboris. Elo lav. What? Elo lav mine. So rather, it must be that no, we're saying that even if she collects from the husband, if she gets divorced and she's collecting from the husband, even so, it's from Ziboris. La'olam miyasme, the Gemara answers, no, really it is talking about the Yisomim. That if she's an almana, and she's collecting her ksuba from the Yisomim, so then she collects from the Ziboris. Now, if she's a divorcee and she's collecting for her husband, then she would collect from Beinonis. But if she's collecting from the Yisomim because she's a widow, so then she collects from the Ziboris, right? I hope I said that right. We're saying right now that if she is a divorcee, she'll collect Beinonis from her ex-husband, and if she's a widow, she'll collect Ziboris from the Yisomim. The question is, well, what's the chiddush then about a widow? Anybody who collects from Yisomim collects from Ziboris. So uchsubas isha, it's stricha le, but nonetheless we had to specify, we had to point out that the ksuba of a woman is nonetheless collected from Ziboris, from the orphans, because I may have thought mishum chino akilu rabbonon gabo. I may have thought that because of the principle, the concept of chino, that we want women to get married to men, and therefore we need to treat them with sensitivity, and because if we're not treating them properly, they're not going to be interested in getting married to the men. And therefore, I may have thought that because of chino, out of the interest of because of chino. What do you want me to tell you? Chino. That's the concept. Because of chino, I may have thought that maybe an almana would collect beinonis from the yisomim. Nisht kamash malon. That no, an almana, just like everybody else, collects her ksube from the ziboris, from the yisomim. Omar Rave Toshma, says Rave, come in here. Reb Meir Omer ksubas isha bebeinonis. Reb Meir says that the ksube of, right, that a woman's ksuba is collected from beinonis. Miman. Who's she collecting from, right, who's she collecting her ksuba from beinonis? Ilema miyasme. If she's collecting from the yisomim, and she's collecting beinonis, right, because we had just said that we're talking about, Tanakama says from ziboris, Reb Meir says beinonis, and we said we're talking about from the yisomim. But if we're talking about the yisomim, then how come Reb Meir says that she collects from the beinonis? Leislei, the Reb Meir or the Tanan, does Reb Meir not hold that ein nefraim minichse yisomim ela min haziboris? Does he not hold of what we had learned in the Mishnah, that when it comes to payment from yisomim, it's only from ziboris? Why is Reb Meir saying that a widow would collect her ksuba from beinonis? Elalav mine. So rather, it must be then that when Reb Meir says that she's collecting her ksuba from beinonis, it's not talking about from the yisomim, it's talking about from him. Which implies that when the rabbis say from ziboris, it's also talking about him, not the yisomim. Lo nisht leolam miyasme. No, it is talking about the yisomim. It is talking about the yisomim. It is talking about the yisomim. It is talking about the yisomim, right? And Reb Meir is saying that the widow collects her ksuba from the yisomim beinonis, according to Reb Meir. How could Reb Meir say beinonis? I thought that whenever you collect from the yisomim, it's always ziboris. V'shayni ksubas isha mishum chino. That yes, but the ksube of a but the ksuba, but he dafka says mishum chino that an almana gets to collect from beinonis because we want to treat her better. Because we don't want to have her have a negative experience collecting her ksuba, because otherwise she won't want to get married to any other men. So therefore we give her preferential treatment, and she and even though everybody else collects from ziboris from the yisomim, she can collect from beinonis from the yisomim, according to Reb Meir. Amar Abai, says Abai, Toshma, come in here. Hanizokin shomin loen bo'idis. We said, what the Mishnah had said, that when it comes to nizakin, damages, so that's paid by idis, the best fields. Uvalchov beinonis, a creditor is paid from, middle fields, beinonis. Uchsubas isha beziboris, and the ksuba of a woman is collected from ziboris. So miman, but now who are we talking about? If we're saying talking about the yisomim, right? Because we just said that ksubas isha miziboris is talking about the yisomim. Well, if the ksubas isha is talking about collecting from yisomim, so mistama nizakin and balchov is also talking about, right? Meaning the Mishnah said anizakin shaman loem beidis uvalchov bebeinonis uksubas isha beziboris, right? Right, and that was our Mishnah. So if we're talking about yisomim, so then all of them must be talking about yisomim. But my area ksubas isha afilu kol hane nami. But then why are we saying that if we're talking about collecting from the yisomim, why are we saying that only the ksubas isha is collected from ziboris? We said, right, that anything collected from yisomim is collected from ziboris, so that should apply to nizakin and to balchov as well. So elalav mine. So rather, actually, we must be talking about collecting from him. right? Not the orphans, but the fellow himself. And we're saying that it's collected from Ziboris, from him. Rav Meir would say Benonis. Omer Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, says Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, actually you can say that it's talking about the Yisomim. You can say that it's talking about the Yisomim, but it's talking about a specific case. Well, it's not actually talking about. Well, no. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov has his own situation. Amar Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, Hachav Ma'askinon. He says here, what are we talking about in the Mishnah when we say that a Baal Chov? Okay, the Mishnah had said that whenever anybody collects from Yisomim, it's always going to be from Ziboris, right? That's that. Now, the Mishnah had said that Nizakin is Idis, Baal Chov is Benonis, Ksubasisha is Ziboris. Now, what's the context? Are we talking about Yisomim? Are we talking about Benoni? Minei? Are we talking about him? So we said, well, so initially we had said that it's talking about Yisomim, but we had just said, yeah, but what about Nizakin and what about Baal Chov? Is that talking about Yisomim? That should be Ziboris. So comes up Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, he says, look, this when we're talking about Nizakin be'idis, Baal Chov be'benonis, Ksubasisha beziboris, this is the following is the context that we're talking about. Hachav ma'askin, and this is what we're talking about. Kigon, for example, shenaise orev lenizke beno levalchov beno ulichsubas kaloso v'haiki dine v'haiki dino nizakun uvalchov dmechaim gavu iu nami kimagbe kimechaim magbe ksubas isha delachar misa gabyo ulachar misa miman gabyo miyasme iu nami kimagbe kilachar misa magbe baram. What does that mean? So the situation is talking about that is talking about the following situation. That is talking about the following situation. That you have a fellow, right? We had three examples. We had Nizakin, we had Baal Chov, and we had Ksubas Isha. So you have a fellow, right? A fellow, his ox damages somebody's field. You have a fellow, he borrowed $1,000. You have a fellow, he got married, and now he has the responsibility of a ksuba. Now, in all of these cases, his father was the guarantor. His father was saying, look, hopefully my son will be able to pay. If not, I'll guarantee it. I'll be the guarantor. Then the son dies. And now that the son is dead, and he didn't pay it, and now that the son is dead, so they come after the father. Right? So the Nizakin, they come after the father. The Baal Chov comes after the father. The Ksubas Isha, she wants to get her ksuba, they come to the father. So now when it comes to the Nizakin, and when it comes to the Baal Chov, so these were payments that the son owed already when he was alive. And when the son was alive, so Nizakin is Idis, Baal Chov is Benonis, so the father is responsible to pay. Idis for the Nizakin, Benonis for the Baal Chov. When it comes to Ksubas Isha, the son didn't owe, right? He wasn't divorced. He didn't owe that money for the Ksubas Isha when he was alive, when the son was alive. The father would only be responsible to pay after he's dead. Right? Meaning he wasn't divorced. We're not assuming he was going to get divorced. We're assuming that when would the father have to pay? In the event that his son died. And if his son dies, Memele, who are they coming to collect from? We're talking about the Yisomim. And his father is guaranteeing that money. And anybody who collects from the Yisomim collects from Memele, from Ziboris. And that is why the father is guaranteeing Ziboris, right? So when we're saying that the Nizakin is is Edis, and the Balchov is Benonis, and the Ksubas Isha is Ziboris, it's talking about the situation where the father was guaranteeing the son's chovis, right? He owed money for Nizakin, he owed money for loans, he owes, right? He was married. So when we say that Nizakin is Edis and Balchov is Benonis, that's because the son, when he was alive, already owed that money, and the son would have had to pay Edis for the Nizakin and Benonis for the Balchov, and the father was guaranteeing that money. So he accepted upon himself Edis for the Nizakin and Benonis for the Balchov. What did the father accept upon himself for the Ksuba? Well, for the Ksuba, he's only basically if his son dies. Well, if his son dies, then basically the Ksuba would be collected from the Yesomim. The Yesomim would be Ziboris, and therefore he accepted upon, right? He has to guarantee only Ziboris, and that's what it means when we're talking about Nizakin is Edis, Balchov is Benonis, and Ksubas Isha is Ziboris. We're talking about a situation where the husband guaranteed that money, and that's how you can explain each of those scenarios being about the same. Each of those three being about the same scenario, i.e., when the father was guaranteeing the money. So let's read it again. So Amar Vacha Bar Yaakov says, Vacha Bar Yaakov, Hachav Ma'eskinon. What's the Mishnah talking about? Kigon shenaisa arv l'nizkei beno. If you have a father who was guaranteeing the chovis of his son, levalchov. So l'nizkei beno. So if his son's ox damaged, and now his son's on the line for that money, and then he died and he didn't pay it. Levalchov beno, or his son borrowed $1,000, his son died and he hadn't paid it. Ulchsubas chalaso, or his son died and now his wife is collecting the ksuba. V'haiki dino, and each one, the father is responsible to guarantee the money. Each one, based on its predicament, its context. Nizakin uvalchov, that when it comes to damages and when it comes to the loan, Timechayim gabu, that the son was already responsible, right? That was already responsible to pay them. They're already going to be collected when the son was alive, and he was guaranteeing it. So iunami ki magbe, ki mechayim magbe. So also with regard to the father, when they collect it like when the son was alive, which is nizakin idis, balchov benonis. Whereas Ksubas Isha delachar misa gabi, whereas Ksubas Isha that he's guaranteeing, which would only be collected in the event that he died, ula'achar misa miman gabi miyasme. And who do you collect things after? From the Yisomim, from the heirs. So iunami, so also when he's guaranteeing, ki magbe kila'achar misa magbe. Then when they're collecting from him, they're collecting like after misa, like collecting from the Yisomim, which is Ziboris. V'tepuk lei the Arv the Chsuba lo mishtaibed. But 1 second. But I thought that in Arev, a guarantor of a Ksuba isn't actually being mishabed anything. We're gonna learn about it in a few minutes. Well, depends how long we can explain it, but in a few more lines at least we could say that a fellow who guarantees a ksuba isn't actually guaranteeing the ksuba. So what are we talking about here? That the father was the guarantor. The guarantor isn't actually accepting upon committing to guaranteeing anything when it comes to a ksuba. So bikablon. Okay, a kablon. I don't really know what a kablon is. I imagine that we're gonna get to more sugyas about it and maybe we'll have a better idea. But essentially a kablon seems to be, I could say this about a kablon, it appears to be more of a obligation. He's accepting, taking more responsibility to pay than an arif, right? So a guarantor. What's a guarantor? Ruvain borrows $1,000 from Shimon. Shimon says, "Look, I'm only going to give you the $1,000. If I need a guarantor that if you default on this, the guarantor is gonna pay." So Levi says, "Fine, I'll guarantee fine, I have no problem. Sure, Ruvain, you're a good friend of mine, maybe even my brother, whatever it is. Ruvain, you're a good guy. I want you to get the loan. I'm happy to guarantee it, no problem." But the underlying assumption is like, Ruvain, I'm happy to guarantee it so you can get the loan, but like, I'm expecting that you're going to be paying the loan, Ruvain, right? In that case, right, Levi is guaranteeing the loan, but it's like, call me if you need me, but hopefully you won't need me kind of thing. Whereas a kablan is a more proactive thing, right? Kablan would be more if like Levi is saying, yes, Ruvain is totally good for the money, and like he's like more proactive in sort of establishing that if you need the money, Levi's available for the money, and in that case, apparently Shimon can even collect directly from Levi. I think that's a possibility as well. Whereas a guarantor, Shimon cannot go directly to Levi for the money. He would have to, right? Levi would be like, hey, what? You and go to Reuven. You lent money to Reuven. Yeah, I'll guarantee it if Reuven doesn't have it. But right, Shimon has to first go to Reuven. If Reuven defaults, then what can Levi do? He accepted to guarantee it. But by a kablan, it's more proactive. That Shimon can even go directly to Levi and say, hey, Levi, can you give me money? And Levi will be sure. And then Levi will go to Reuven and say, okay, Reuven, by the way, I paid Shimon, give me, I need you to pay me back. So we're talking about a kablan. So while in Arev, a guarantor by a ksuba doesn't actually have to pay, but a kablan, who's more proactive about it, would have to pay when it comes to a ksuba. Kablan, so that makes sense if you say that a kablan, even if the love doesn't have any property, still accepts it, right? Meaning the assumption, right, that I was just explaining was that by kablonus, so Levi is saying to Shimon, yes, you can lend Reuven the money, right? And we're saying that in that case, Shimon can even accept from, can go to Levi and ask for the money, and Levi will go to Reuven and say, hey, Reuven, I paid back Shimon, can you pay me back? But maybe that only works because Levi's right? Levi knows that Reuven has property. He has the money, right? Levi's not concerned that he's not going to get his money back. But what if Reuven doesn't have any property? Would Levi still get involved in this arrangement when he might be on the line for the money and he might not be able to get it back from Reuven? Right? So again, this makes sense if you say kablon al gav de leisle nichse lelove mishtabed shaper. So if you say that Levi's willing to get into this arrangement, even knowing that Reuven doesn't have any property, well, if that's the case, then fine. But according to the opinion who says that a kablan will only get involved if he knows that, right, Levi will only get involved if he knows that Reuven has property. But if Reuven doesn't have property, Levi's not going to get involved because Levi will, be responsible to pay and he won't be able to get it back from Reuven. So if that's the case, then sure, the father might be a kablan over here with his son and the ksuba, but if his son doesn't have anything, maybe the father would not be considered a kablan. Well, you could say that it's talking about where the son did have property, just the property then got ruined, which is why the father's now on the line. But at the time, Reuven had property. The son had property, which is why the father accepted to be, took it upon himself to be the Ariv, the kablan. By same alternative, called legabe brei shebude mishabed nafshe, or even if you're going to say that a kablan will only get involved if the borrower has property, but maybe you could say, but in the case of a son and a father, the father will be willing to step in, even if the son does not have any property. Fine. Friends, we're more than 20 minutes into the daf. We are not even on today's daf nun. We are still on daf memtes amud beis. We are still on daf memtes amud beis, although we're mamish a few words away from daf nun, but I'm just for context, this is quite the daf. Itmar was stated arev dichsuba, so an arev on a ksuba divrei lo mushtabin, right? So we just said that in arev on a ksuba, everyone says that there's no shibud. He's not going to have to guarantee the money of the ksuba. Kablon de bal chov divrei kol mushtabin, and everyone agrees that kablonus by a loan, everyone agrees that Levi is going to pay. Arev de bal chov, when you have a guarantor by a loan, the kablon de ksuba, or a kablon when it comes to a ksuba, plige. This is machlokas. To those who say that even if the love does not have any property, he's willing to be mishtaybet himself. V'ika lemanda omar isle mishtaybet ilesle lo mishtaybet. There's an opinion who says that no, he'll only get involved if Levi will only get involved if Reuven has property. V'ilchsa b'chulu, afagav deleis le mishtayber. And the halacha is that by all of these examples, even though he does not have property, he can still the kabbalah of the Ariv will be mishabed himself. Okay. Bar may Ariv dechsuba, with the exception being in Ariv of a ksuba, that fagav de islay lo mishtabed, that even if the chosin does have property, the guarantor of the ksuba is not actually accepting responsibility upon himself to pay for the ksuba. My time outcome mitzvah da'avid v'lomidi chaseira. Well, because he's only acting. He's not planning on actually guaranteeing the ksuba. He's just guaranteeing the ksuba in order, so that the wife will be wanting to do this mitzvah of getting married, and at the end of the day, she's not losing anything, right? Meaning, if Levi says, I'm going to guarantee the money I'm going to guarantee that Reuven's going to pay, well, what ends up happening? Shimon now loses $1,000. He gives $1,000 to Reuven. So he's actually spending money. But in the case of a woman getting married, she's not actually paying any, she's not losing anything, technically, in that sense, at least in a financial sense. And therefore, the guarantor by the ksuba is really just saying, he's just trying to make people feel good, like, yeah, go ahead with the wedding. But he's not actually accepting upon himself to pay the ksuba. And that is because he wants to motivate them to get married, and she's also not losing anything by getting married. Amar Ravina, says Ravina, Tashma, me'ikara ditakantin yosef masha ish rotza lisa isha rotza linase. So says Ravina that really the main, right, he quotes a brayso that says that the main reason why the ksuba of a woman is collected from Ziboris is because at the end of the day, more than a fellow wants to get married, a fellow wants to be married, and therefore, even if the ksuba is just Ziboris, then she will be willing to get married. And if you're saying that it's talking about the Yisomim, and if you're saying that we're talking about the Yisomim, that she's collecting the Ziboris because it's the Yisomim, well, then the reason why the ksuba of a woman is Ziboris is because it's Yisomim, not because of Yosef Mashe Ha'ish Lisa Isha Rotzalina. So it's not because of that. It's because it's the Yisomim Tiyuvta to Marzutra Tiyuvta. So that's Taka Akasha on Marzutra Breder of Nachman. Marzutra Breder of Nachman had said that we're talking about a Almona, but apparently it seems that no, we're talking about even a grusha, even a divorcee would only collect Ziboris because the main reason being Yosef Masha Ish Rotze Lisa Ish Rotze Linase. Which is interesting. It seems like these two concepts are like competing, right? This concept of Yosef Masha Ish Rotze Lisa Ish Rotze Linase and China, those two things seem to be in opposition. Okay, fine. Moving on. Or Marzutra Breder of Nachman, Mishmeder of Nachman. So Marzutra Breder of Nachman says in the name of Rav Nachman, Shtarchov Ayotze al Ayisomim. So if there is a Shtarchov Ayotze al Ayisomim, right? Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon. Reuven dies. Now Shimon wants to collect money collect $1,000 from the estate of Reuven, from the Yisomim. So again, so Shimon shows up with his document that says that he's owed $1,000 from the estate. Even though it's written, right, the contract that Reuven and Shimon had was that Reuven was going to pay from Edis, from the best property. Nonetheless, since Reuven's dead and Shimon is collecting from the Yisomim, Eino Gove Ella Min HaZiboris, Shimon, when he's collecting from the Yisomim, that agreement that he had with Reuven goes away. He doesn't collect from Edis, he collects from Ziboris because he's collecting from the Yisomim. Amar Abayi Teda, and Abayi brings support for this because the Balchov Dine Bebenonis, because after all, a Balchov, right, Shimon, when Reuven's alive, Shimon would collect from Benonis, Umiyasme Beziboris, and yet, when Reuven dies and he's collecting from the Yisomim, Shimon no longer collects from Benonis, he collects from Ziboris. So the same thing applies to Edis, right? If Shimon was entitled to collect from Edis, and now if Shimon was entitled to collect from Edis, now Reuven's dead, so he's collecting from the Yisomim, he's not going to collect Edis, he's going to collect Ziboris. right? Just like instead of Beinonis, he's collecting Ziboris, so in this case, instead of Idis, he's collecting Ziboris. Omerle Rav says to Abaye, Hochi Ashta, Balchov Dine Mida Oraise Biziboris Kideula. Rav says, one second. Rav says, one second. He says, 1 second. Rav says that Me'ikar Adin Mida Oraise, when Shimon lends $1,000 to Reuven, and Reuven defaults, and Shimon wants to collect, and Shimon goes to collect from Reuven's property, Mida Oraise, Shimon is only entitled to collect from Ziboris Mida Oraise. Let's read that again. Amalei Rav says to Abaye, Hochi Ashta Baal Chov, when it comes to a Baal Chov, Dine Mida Oraise B'Ziboris. Mida Oraise, Shimon is entitled to go to Reuven's property and collect from Ziboris. Kideula, like Ula de Amar Ula, that Ula says, Dvar Teire, Mida Oraise, Baal Chov B'Ziboris. A Baal Chov, Shimon is only entitled to collect from Reuven's Ziboris. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Bachutz Tamod Ve'ish V'Gomer, it says in the context of a loan and a collateral, that Shimon, the lender, needs to stay outside of the house of Reuven. Ma darko shel ish lahotzi pachal shebekel. That if Reuven needs to come out and give something to Shimon, right, his creditor, he's going to try and give the least expensive stuff. So, therefore, we see that when a Baal Chov, Shimon, collects from Reuven, he's only Mida Oraise entitled to Ziboris, to the worst quality lands. Umatam Amru Baal Chov Bibeinonis. Well, if Mida Oraise Shimon is only entitled to Ziboris from Reuven, well then how come the Chachamim said that Shimon collects from Beinonis? Kidei shelo tinol deles bifnei loven. Well, because we don't want to lock doors in front of borrowers, right? If Shimon, who's a lender, knows that if Reuven defaults, he's only going to be able to collect from his junkiest lands, well, that's not such of an incentive for Shimon to want to get involved in lending money to Reuven, who needs it. So therefore, the Chacham sweeten the deal a shtickle for Shimon to say, look, if Reuven defaults, you're not going to collect from the junky stuff, you're going to collect from the Beinonis, from the better stuff. So, but Mida Oraisa though, Shimon is really only entitled to Ziboris. The Chacham, bump it up to Beinonis just to kind of sweeten the deal for lenders to want to lend. And which means that money is then available for borrowers who need it. V'gabe Yasme, but if Reuven dies and now Shimon's collecting from the Yisomim, we say, okay, the sort of we're more concerned with the orphans than we are with sweetening the deal for Shimon. Ukmua Rabbanon Adairaisa. So the rabbi said, no, let's just stick to the Ikra Adin Mida Oraisa when we're dealing with the Yisomim, which is Ziboris. But the point being that when we're saying that we collect that Shimon can only collect from Yisomim, from the Ziboris, all we're saying is that we're sticking to the Dinim de Oraisa. That we're just going back OG. We're going back to the de Oraisas over here, which is Ziboris. But Elohocha came with the Dinim de Oraisa Be'idis. Now here's Rava's Kasha, or his challenge, or his alternative opinion, which is, but in this case, Shimon and Reuven made up that Reuven was going to be paying from Edis, which means that Mida Oraisa, the shibud on this loan is for the Edis. And therefore, afilu miyas minam be'idis, right? And therefore, just like the Yisomim in general, right? If Shimon's collecting from the Yisomim, he would collect from the Ziboris because that's the Ikra Adin Mida Oraisa. Well, in this case, when Reuven had accepted upon himself that he was going to be paying back Shimon from Edis, well then Mida Oraisa, Edis is now right. The Edis fields are Meshuba to the loan, and therefore Mida Oraisa, Shimon has the right to collect from Edis in this case, according to Ravi. Uli Ravi. But Frek the Gemara, but Ravi, 1 second, I have a kasha, Ravi. Ve'atoni Avram Chizah, but Avram Chizah taught a nefrain minichse Yisomim. We don't collect from the nichse Yisomim, element as Ziboris, from Ziboris, va'afilu hein nizokin. Even even nizakin are paid if you're collecting from the Yisomim from the Ziboris. V'nizakin dinan midoraisa be'idis, but nizakin midoraisa are idis. So I don't understand, right? Rava, you're saying that we go by the deoraisis, and we're saying that by Yisomim, the reason why Shimon only collects Ziboris is because midoraisa, that's what he's entitled to collect. But if he was entitled to collect idis midoraisa, he would collect idis midoraisa. But one second, what about this brisa where we're saying that even nizakin are collected from Ziboris when we're talking about Yisomim? Even though nizakin, midoraisa is meitav sadeu, meitav kamri yishalim, midoraisa nizakin is idis stuff. So achav ma'askin on here, what are we talking about? Kugon sha'isa, idis, the nizak, kiziboris, the mazik. Well, it's like the case that we're talking about yesterday. We're talking about where the where Ruvain, the damager, is a tycoon, and Shimon's a pasha yid. Shimon's the nizak, Shimon's who got damaged. Shimon's best fields, his idis fields, are the equivalent of Ruvain the tycoon's Ziboris fields. So when we're saying that he gets paid with Ziboris, that the Yisomim pay with Ziboris, that's talking about this case. We're talking about the Ziboris of Ruvain, which is the idis of Shimon. Rabbi Shmuel, and it's like Rabbi Shmuel, the Omer midoraisa bedinit zakshaminon, that he says that midoraisa, really we evaluate based on the nizak, based on Shimon, which and we're going based on his idis, which is Ruvain's Ziboris. Mipnei tikkun olam takinu rabbanon b'demazik, and only because of tikkun olam we say that we pay with Ruvain the tycoon's creme de la creme. But v'gaba yasmi okua rabbanon adoraisa. But here as well, Rava would say by the Yisomim we just stick to the dinim doraisa, which according to Rabbi Shmuel is that not the creme de la creme of Ruvain, but rather the idis of Shimon, which is the Ziboris of Ruvain. Ini. Now, frek the Gemara, but one second, Rava, is this so? Is this so that if Ruvain and Shimon, right, if Ruvain had committed to Shimon that he was going to be paying back the loan from idis, so Rava says that if Ruvain dies, then Shimon's entitled to collect from idis from the Yisomim. That's what Rava had said. But is that true? Ini, really? V'atani Rabbi Lazar nivsaya taught, Ein nifrayin minichse Yisomim ela min aziboris, that you only get paid back from the nichs, from the orphans, from Ziboris, va'afilu hein idis, and even if they are idis. My afilu hein idis. What do you mean that you get paid back from the Yisomim, from Ziboris, if they're idis? What does that mean? Lav afagav dichsiv idis bishtar. Does it not mean that even though the idis is written in the document? Sorry, spaced out for a second. Is it not exactly the case that Rav is talking about? That even though Reuven and Shimon had written in their document that Reuven was going to pay from idis, and nonetheless we're saying that Shimon could only collect from Ziboris? Lo, nisht. My idis, shvai idis. No. In that case, it's talking about where the idis got ruined, right? So Rav is saying, if Reuven and Shimon, right, if Reuven had committed to Shimon that he was going to pay him back from the idis, so if Reuven dies, Shimon collects from the idis. But if the idis gets ruined, I don't know, maybe a flood came and it got flooded or whatever, so then we don't go to Benonis, we just go straight down to Ziboris in that case. Rava, like Rava, the Amar Rava, that says Rava, Hizik Ziboris, that if the Nezek was on, right, Reuven's shore, gored, ate Shimon's Ziboris, Govim and Idis, we collect from the idis, right? We collect, right? Meaning, I think that is talking about when Kilu he eats the idis of Shimon, that is like the Ziboris of Reuven, I think. And we're saying that so then Shimon, we said either according to Rabbi Shmuel because of Tikkun Olam, or according to Rabbi Akiva Meikar Adin, Shimon collects from the creme de la creme of Ruvain. Shvai idis, but if the best of the best idis, something happens to it, gove, where am I? Ziboris gove mina idis, shvai idis gove mina benonis. So if that idis is not available, so then he collects from benonis. V'gabe yasmei okmur rabbanan adoraisa. But by the yisomim, we just go on the deoraisa, which would be the ziboris. All right, fine. Alright, so that's what that price is talking about. Okay, so as we have been saying, that Shimon can only collect from the orphans from Ziboris. Rav Achdavui bar Ami. Rav Achdavui bar Ami asked the following question. Yisomim she'amru, when we're talking about these orphans, are they ketanim? Are we talking about minor orphans? Or afilu gedolim, or maybe even adult orphans? Still, Shimon can only collect from the adult orphans from the Ziboris. Do we say takanti the avud rabban gabi yisom liktanim avud? Do we say that when the Chachamim made this takana that Shimon can only collect from the Ziboris, it's for the minors? Liktanim avud rabbanon, likdolim lo avud rabbanon. But the rabbis didn't make that takana for adults. If they're adults, no, Shimon would collect from benonis. O Dilma, or perhaps Mishum delo masika adaita demalve demislove vinofli nichse kame yasme davli noel delis hilkach afilu gdolim nami. Let me just explain that outside for a second. Again, what's the whole point? Why Shimon collects from Benoni in general? We said me'ikar adin mida oraise. Shimon collects from Ziboris. But we said in order to sweeten the deal for Shimon, so that he'll, be incentivized to want to lend money and not be stuck with like junky Ziboris fields if the borrower defaults. So we say, you know what? Even though Midoraisa Shimon's only entitled to Ziboris, let's sweeten the deal shtickle by saying he'll be entitled to Beinonis. So the point of Beinonis is Shalotino Delis B'fnei Lovin. Now the question is, if Ruvain dies, and now Shimon can only collect from the Ziboris, would that disincentivize? I think that's the word maybe I was thinking of yesterday, maybe actually, that I could not figure out. I think maybe it's disincentivize. Is that even a word? It is now. So would it disincentivize Shimon to lend money if he knows that in the event, or discourage? I bet that was the word I was thinking of. It's a more obvious word. Discourage. I bet that's what it is. Disincentivize. Discourage. Either one of them. Disincentivize courage. Disincentivize courage. Discourage incentivize. Okay, come on. I wanna go weiter. So the question is, if Shimon knows that in the event that Ruvain dies, then he'll only be able to collect from Ziboris, will that disincentivize him from lending the money? Right? Because the whole point of the Beinonis was to incentivize him to lend the money. Is Shimon thinking, wait, but 1 second, if Ruvain dies, then I'll only be able to collect Ziboris from the Yisomim? Is he thinking that? If he is thinking that, well then maybe if the Yisomim are adults, then it should be Benoni. Or, no, he's not thinking about that. Well, if that's the case, well then it doesn't make a difference if his Yisomim, if the Yisomim are Gedolim or Ktanim. Either way, it's not going to affect whether or not he's going to lend money, so we don't need to make it a Benoni. We can keep it at Ziboris even for the adults. So again, let's read it from the beginning. Rav Achdavui bar Ami asks, Yisomim she'amru, then when we're talking about the orphans, Ketanim, are we talking about only minors, or afilu gedolim, or even if they're adults? Takanti de avud rabbanon gabi yasme liktanim avud rabbanon, likdolim lo avud rabbanon. When the rabbis say that by Yisomim you can collect from Ziboris, is that only for Ketanim or right, but not for Gedolim? Or perhaps Mishum de lo masik adaito dimalve, or maybe Shimon he doesn't think about it. Think about the possibility, demis love, that Reuven's gonna die, and then he's gonna have to collect the loan from the orphans, for him to think twice about lending the money. He doesn't think that way. Therefore, there's no hurt in there's no problem with even allowing right, even with Shimon only being able to collect from the Ziboris, even if the Yisomim are adults. Tashmaka, Menir Tani Abai Kshisha taught Yisomim Sha'omru Gidolim. Then when we're talking about the orphans, we're talking about adults, Ve'in Tzarech Lomar Ketanim, and it goes without saying that also we're talking about minors. V'dilma Hane Mili L'Inyan Shvua, but maybe we're talking about with regard to swearing, right? As we've learned before, that anybody who needs to collect from Yisomim, from orphans, must swear that they're in fact owed the money. So maybe we're saying just in terms of people needing to swear, there's no difference between if the Yisomim are Gedolim or Ketanim. Because at the end of the day, even an adult doesn't know all of the details of his father's dealings, and he doesn't know, was it already paid, was it not? So therefore, regardless of the age of the children, if you want to collect from the estate, you have to swear that you haven't collected anything and that you're in fact owed the money. But in terms of being able to collect from the Ziboris, maybe if they're adults, they would have to pay with Beinunis. The halacha is Yisomim she'amru gedolim v'tzarech lomar ketanim. That when we're talking about orphans, there's no difference. It's both adults and minors. Bein the shvua, bein the ziboris, and that's both in terms of having to swear that you're in fact owed money, as well as only being entitled to collect from ziboris. We are now getting to the final push of today's daf, and as I said, the final push is it's a sugya. Right? I said, even though I generally don't like to get into a big sugya at the end of the daf, but I don't know, this doesn't feel like that though. I don't know why. It doesn't feel like a whole new thing. I guess maybe because it's also the same thing. It's not like a new concept so much, but okay, we still have some work to do on the stuff. Here we go. The Mishnah had said that we don't collect from Nechasim Mishubadim when you can collect from Nechasim B'nei Chorin. Who can tell me what that means? So, of course, Reuven borrows $1,000 from Shimon. And the deal is, if Reuven defaults on the loan, so Shimon can collect from Reuven's property. Now Reuven has two properties. Let's just say, for example, one property is the Benoni property, and the other property is the Ziboris property. So now both properties are meshubah to this loan. Now if Reuven defaults on the loan, Shimon can collect from Reuven. Mistam is going to collect the Benoni property. But Reuven sold the Benoni property to Levi. Now he defaults on the loan. Shimon wants to collect. He wants to collect from the Benoni property, but the Benoni property is sold to Levi. So Shimon has no choice but to collect from the Ziboris property, which is available. And that's what we're saying, right? Shimon cannot get paid back from a field that was already sold, when there's a field that has not yet been sold, even if the field that was sold was Benoni and the one that is available is Ziboris, it doesn't matter. You collect from what's available. What if Reuven didn't sell the field to Levi? What if he gave the field as a gift to Levi? And then he defaults on the loan to Shimon. Shimon wants to collect the Benoni field, but the Benoni field has been given as a gift to Levi. Can Shimon take the Benoni field, or is he stuck with the Ziboris field? So do we say takanto da'avid rabbanon mishum pseida de lekuchis? Do we say, look, the whole point of the rabbi saying that Shimon cannot collect the Benoni field, he has to collect the available Ziboris field, is because pseida de lekuchis, we want to watch out for the buyers. We want to protect the buyers. That Levi purchased the field from Reuven, And we don't want a situation where people are buying fields and then somebody knocks on their door and then they lose their field all of a sudden. They have to go back to the buyer. It becomes a whole mess. If we can avoid that mess, we can protect the buyers and protect business. So then that is preferable. Let Shimon collect the available field. Avol. Matana deleka pseida de lekuchis. But by a gift, where Reuven is simply giving the field to Levi as a gift, well then there's no protecting of any buyers. Levi is not a buyer, he's a receiver of a gift, in which case maybe Shimon can collect the bein on his field from Levi, who received it as a gift from Reuven. O Dilma, or perhaps, Matana Nami, also when it comes to a gift, why do you think Reuven was giving Levi a field? That's quite a nice gift to give somebody. Ilab de isle anoya mine lo yoivle matono. Vilkoch kipsede de lekuchos dami. Right? Alternatively, why would Reuven simply just be, it sounds very nice and very magnanimous, is not very gracious of Reuven to simply give a field to Levi as a gift. That's very nice of him. But let's be honest. Reuven probably didn't just give a field to Levi as a gift. Levi probably did something for Reuven, and Reuven owed him. Reuven felt that he wanted to do something for Levi. I hope I didn't just say Shimon. Shimon's not involved right now. Not yet. Right, Levi probably did something for Reuven. Reuven felt indebted to Levi, so he gave him a field. So if you look at it from that lens, well, then you can view Levi as a lakoch. You can view Levi as a buyer, as a purchaser, as somebody who did something and is getting paid back with this field, and we may want to protect him. So that's the question. The question is, if Reuven gave his field to Levi, the Benoni field to Levi, the Benoni field to Levi as a gift, can Shimon collect the Benoni field from Levi, or is he stuck with the Ziboris that's available? So Omelei Mark Shisha Beider of Chizdei Ravashi. So says Mark Shisha, I didn't skip anything, right? I don't think so. I don't think I skipped anything. So Omelei Mark Shisha Beider of Chizdei Ravashi. So says Mark Shisha Beider of Chizdei Ravashi. Toshma, come in here. Shriv Mira. If you have Reuven, and Reuven is on his deathbed, She'omar, and he says, Tnu Masayim Zuz Lifloni, give 200 Zuz to Levi. V'gimel Meos Lifloni, give 300 Zuz to Yehuda. V'dal Meos Lifloni, and 400 Zuz to Yisachar. Okay, so Reuven's dying, and he writes down, give 200 Zuz to Levi, 300 Zuz to Yehuda, 400 Zuz to Yisachar. We don't say that whoever is written into the document first gets first dibs. We don't say that Levi gets first dibs on his 200 zuz, Yehuda gets next dibs on the 300 zuz, and Yisachar gets final dibs, gets last dibs on the 400 zuz. We don't say that. There's no order there. He just said, I'm giving 200 to Levi, 300 to Yehuda, 400 to Yisachar. There's no order there. Therefore, Yotza Olav Shtarchov, if Shimon shows up and says, hey, I'm owed 450 zuz, Reuven owed me 450 zuz, and Reuven's dead now, Gove Mikulan, he collects from all of them, right? Levi had 200 zuz, Yehuda had 300 zuz, Yisachar had 400 zuz, so they're all responsible to chip in to pay back Shimon 450 zuz relative to the amount that they received. So Levi would pay 100 zuz, Yehuda would pay 150 zuz, that's 250 total, and Yisachar would pay 200 zuz, which is 250 and 200 is 450. Shimon would be paid back, and Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar each contributed to paying back Shimon relative to what they received from Reuven. Okay. Avol, however, im Omar, but if what Reuven had written in the document is Tnu Masayim Zuz Lefloni, first give 200 zuz to Levi, ve'acharav lifloni, and then afterwards, from what remains, from what's left, give 300 zuz to Yehuda, ve'acharav lifloni, and finally, only with what's left, give 400 zuz to Yisachar. So in that case, then the order is relevant. That first Levi collects his 200 zuz, then Yehuda collects his 300 zuz, and then Yisachar collects his 400 zuz. And if we're talking about collecting from property, so Levi gets first dibs on the property, and he's going to collect the Beinonis. And then, Yehuda and Yisachar, if all that's left is Ziboris, they're going to get stuck with these Ziboris. The Fichach, and therefore, Yotza Olav Shtarchov, if Shimon shows up and he wants to get paid, well, in that case, Govim and Achrin, he first gets paid back from Yisachar, because Yisachar is at the bottom, right, the lowest priority. So if Shimon comes and he wants to get paid back 450 zuz, so Yisachar is going to have to give all of his 400 zuz. And then Yehuda is going to give, another 50 zuz from his 300 zuz, and then Shimon's fully paid back and he goes away. But in that case, Levi's not paying anything, right? It goes in priority order. So again, Yotza Olav Shtarchov, so if Shimon shows up with we're saying that he's owed 450 zuz. So Govim, I'm making up 450 by the way, just it's a number that I think we could work with. So Govim and Achrin, so he collects from Yisachar. Now if the Yisachar doesn't have enough to pay back Shimon, right? So in this case it's 450 and Yisachar only received 400. So then Govim Mishelefanov, so then he goes to Yehuda to collect the remainder. Ein lo, and if what Yehuda has is not enough, in this case it is, but if what he had was not enough, Govim Mishelefanov, so at that Mishelefanov he then goes to Levi. Ve'afal gav de kama beinonis uvaso miziboris gabi mi beinonis lo gabi. And here's the kicker: even though Levi had collected beinonis, Shimon collects first from Yisachar, who has ziboris. Right? We're saying that if there was a priority, and we're saying that Levi first got his Benoni, which means that when Levi took his Benoni, so then he had it, and the Bnei Chorin were the Ziboris fields, which then Yehuda collected from, which then Yisachar collected from. And we're saying that Shimon has to first collect from Yisachar because he's lowest priority, which means that he's collecting from Yisachar's Ziboris fields, which at the time that Levi collected his 200 zuz in the Benoni fields, Yisachar's fields were the Bnei Chorin. So basically what's happening is Shimon is collecting from the Bnei Chorin before the Mishubadim. He's collecting from Yisachar's Ziboris before he can collect from Ruvain's Benonis. So Shmamina we see, Levi's Benonis. So Shmamina we see that even by Matana, even by these gifts, that Ruvain who was dying, right? Ruvain who died gave these fields as gifts to Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar, and still we're saying that this concept of Shimon has to first collect from Yisachar because ein Ephraim min nechasim meshubadin b'makom sheyesh nechasim b'nei chorin. So Shmamina b'matana nami that oichid when it comes to gifts avud rabbana takanta that the rabbis made a takana that you can only collect from b'nei chorin when they're nechasim meshubad. That if they're nechasim meshubad, you have to collect from b'nei chorin. Now, so the Gemara gives three answers. It says nish, maybe not. Maybe when it comes to if it's a gift, then Shimon would be able to collect the gift, right? And therefore, in our example, if Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon and then gave his Benoni field as a gift to Levi, Shimon would be able to collect the field from Levi. And then how do you explain the situation with the Shchivmira and Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar? Well, Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar weren't simply Ruvain's friends. Ruvain actually owed them money. So there wasn't actually a gift. He actually owed them money. They were right. These weren't gifts. V'atnu ka'amar, but he says give it as a gift. Tnu bechovi, no, it means give it as payment for my debt to them. V'lechzei shtar deman kadim. Well, if that's the case, then why are we giving the order priority based on the order that they're written in his will? Right? He's saying first give it to Levi, then give it to Yehuda, then give it to Yisachar. Why are we going in that order? Why don't we just look at at the loan documents, and whoever's loan was first gets higher priority, right? His shibud was first. So deleka shtar, because it was a milva al peh, there is no document. V'ha kol hakodim b'shtar ka'amar. But he says, but what do you mean? How could it be that there's no document? It says whoever's document is first. B'shtar pekadata. No, it's talking about whoever was first in his will, right? In this document that he wrote that says Levi gets, then Yehuda gets, then Yisachar gets. So in that order, they get it. So we say that no, that wasn't actually a gift. He actually owed them money, so it can't be approved in terms of gifts. Alternatively, afilu matano nami. You can even say that it is talking about gifts. You know what? Yeah, Reuven was giving these things at the end of his life. He was giving it away to Levi, Yehuda, and Yisachar as gifts. But still, v'lokasha ma'gove mina achrin ein nifsad ela achrin. No, it doesn't mean that Shimon collects from the last one, that first he goes and collects from Yisachar, i.e., that he's collecting from the Bnei Chorin instead of Nechasim Meshubadim. No, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean that he first collects from Yisachar. He can actually first collect from Levi, from the Beinoni. So what does it mean that Govim and Achron? What do you mean he's collecting from the last one? He's collecting from the first one. He's collecting from Levi. In Achinami, he collects from Levi, the Beinoni field, but what do you think Levi's going to do? You think Levi's just going to be like, darn it, I lost my field? No. He's going to go to Yisachar and say, hey, Yisachar, move over. I have higher priority. So Yisachar ends up at the end of the day losing his field, but Shimon was nonetheless able to collect the Beinoni. Alternatively, you could say that all the fields were Beinoni fields or Ziboris fields, right? All the fields were the same quality, which is why he's, starting with Yisachar, who is lowest priority. But, if you had Beinoni and Ziboris, so then, you can go for that Beinoni first. Okay. Well, friends, yeah, that last bit was also a shtickle sugya. Friends, that was the afnun of Masechta Gittin. We discussed a woman collecting her ksuba from Ziboris. We discussed, is that talking about from the Yisomim, from the husband. And then we said that sort of when we say that Nizakan is from Edis, Balchov is Beinonis, Ksubasisha is Ziboris, we said that was specifically talking about a situation where the father was a sort of guarantor of the payments of the son, and that's why there are these kind of different levels. Then we discussed other halachas related to collecting only from the Ziboris of the Yisomim, and then we got into the concept of right, and we talked about, does that apply to gifts as well? We could not prove that it applies to gifts as well. Friends, that was the afnun of Masechta Gittin. I hope you enjoyed. Peace out.